All right. Well, so hopefully people turned in your dots project, so PA4. Um, I don't know when I'm going to get those graded, so I have some other things going on this weekend, and I have meetings today and such, so I actually may not get those graded until early next week, kind of depending on how many actual assignments I have to grade, because people did this in groups in some cases. Um, Another all-nighter, cool. Um, Cherish those all-nighters because they can be fun, actually, except when they're not. Um, no rest for the wicked. Have they been downloaded yet? Yeah, so I downloaded already. I'll figure out who it was from the download area. But if you worked with somebody else and you don't have your partner's names in there, that's not good because then I won't know to give people credit. Um, if you worked alone, don't worry about it. I know who you are. Okay, yeah, no problem. Um, and as somebody pointed out, I didn't actually put a comments requirement in the grading rubric for this one. It'll be interesting to see if some people like deleted all their comments because of that. But never hurts to have your name on stuff. Yeah, and commenting is actually really good, even if I'm not taking off points for not commenting. Um, if your code totally doesn't work, um, and I've been working with you and I know you put in the time, but it just like blows up or something as soon as I run it. Sometimes I'll still hop in and see if there's something obvious going on, and in some cases, well commented code makes it easy to go in and say, oh, this should have been called game board instead of game panel, and change that and everything works great. So commenting helps. But yeah, mostly commenting helps you while you're writing it, right? And if you're still putting in comments at the end, try putting in comments as you write your code. It helps organize, and it's this whole idea of when you try to explain something to somebody, that's when you really learn it, right? So I taught differential equations many years ago. That was when I learned differential equations. I taught KVL, KCL, and 120. That's when I learned KVL, KCL. Um, and a lot of times people will come to me with problems in their program, and all I do is I sit back and I say, okay, tell me what you're doing in this code, and they'll start explaining it to me, and halfway through they'll say, wait a minute, I think I see what's wrong. And so that process of explaining is helpful for getting out of our heads, because if you write something and you just keep staring at it, you see the same thing that you think you wrote. When you speak out loud and describe it to somebody, you see it with new eyes. And commenting is a way of doing that, right? It's a way of explaining, what am I doing here? And if you're doing something that doesn't make sense, there's a better chance you're going to notice that when you start trying to write a comment saying why you're doing this. Um, so it's a good practice. Play around with it and see if it helps. And yes, the programs are getting longer. Um, cool. Yeah, and that's the other thing is if you try to go back to this code later on, um, that's easier with comments in place. And PA5 is the networked version of PA4, so you're presumably working on this code for 4 weeks, and the stuff you did, day one, may not be as obvious on day 28. I'll never volunteer for another physics class after this one. So I'll share one piece of advice I learned um, doing my PhD, and I actually wrote this on a wall after the last class. Never take a course with the words plasma physics in it for fun. So that was an important lesson. But other physics courses can be pretty fun. All right. Any last questions on PA4? I've got some general comments I can make about it, but let's look at questions first. Oh, and almost forgot. All right, we got 17 people here. All right. So before we go on, Levi is going to take a few minutes and talk to the class about the Aerospace Club here at Clark. And if you're ready to do that, and I'll give you an option. I can turn off the recording or I can leave it on, and then people who aren't here can see it. Your choice. Just let me know which you prefer.
Oh, you can leave it on. That's fine.
Okay, cool. Do you want to screen share anything?
I actually don't have a presentation. This was kind of a last minute thing, and I didn't think everybody would let me. So I don't actually have a screen share.
Okay. Well,
I do have something here in chat though. So
I'll turn off my microphone and I'll just let you go ahead and talk as long as you like and tell us what you have to tell us.
awesome, cool. And if you guys have any questions after I'm done talking, I mean, feel free to ask them. But anyway, my name's Levi. I am the current president of the Clark Aerospace Program. I have been for the last 2 years, and I have been the team lead for the drone team for the aerospace program for the last 3 years. So basically, what Clark Aerospace Program is it's a school-funded program. So it's versus a club. A program actually gets funding provided by the school in order to do its projects. So we actually have a budget every year that goes towards student-led projects. And in the case of the aerospace program, we work on projects that are, within the context of aerospace. Historically, that's been mostly rocketry and drone stuff. We've also done projects in the past where we designed a Mars rover. Other people have worked on, accessory type projects that, help support a major project that our team is doing. But primarily we do student-led design projects to develop aircraft and rocket systems for international competitions that we do. That's not to say that we don't do other stuff though. So if you guys have any projects that you are interested in that's kind of aerospace themed, feel free to ask me about it afterwards, and I can kind of tell you if that's something we'd be able to do. But basically, what we do, we take these projects, the rocket project and the drone project, and we travel to different competitions. Now, historically, for competitions, we've done things like the NASA Student Launch Competition. We've also competed in Ezra, which is another rocket competition that's a little bit more freeform, down in the New Mexico desert. And then for my team personally, for the drone team, we develop unmanned aircraft that we take to the AUVSI Student Unmanned Aerial Systems Competition in Maryland every year, and we compete. So basically, the whole kind of point of this program was actually it was started by students. Our original advisor, Keith Stansberry, who retired last year, was approached by a student who wanted to build rockets, and he knew that Keith had a rocketry certification, and so Keith said, "Yeah, sure, let's build rockets." And so then from there, basically it took off, and just over the years, more and more students joined the program, and their projects got more and more ambitious. And then a few years later, there was a student who said, "Hey, Keith, I'm not really interested in rockets. I'm more interested in drones. Could I possibly, work on something?" And so Keith threw $1,000 his way, and they built a drone, and they took it to a competition, and they competed with it. So this program gives students the opportunities to lead and run a project like you would in a business. So basically, you have a mission statement for whatever competition or thing that you're wanting to do with it, and then it's your job as the team to figure out how you can best design that system so that it meets all of your mission requirements. And then typically with these competitions, you would then write out a technical paper for it, and then you would design and develop it, and then you would take it and then you would do your work with it. And so that's historically what we've done. Now that is liable to change all depending on what sort of student base we have and what their skill and expertise is. If we don't have students who are capable of doing high-powered rocketry competitions, then we scale it back like we did this last year. And now they're getting their rocketry certifications. And in my case, my team and I have been working via Zoom over the last year and a half to continue to develop our vertical takeoff and landing aircraft so we can compete in competitions with it. It's an aerial delivery drone that we have developed. So that's a little bit about what we are and what our history is. But basically, when I'm talking to you guys, I know a lot of you are actually going on to Washington State University next year. So one thing I want to say for you is that I made it in this last year or two. I've actually made it such that students from Washington State or other programs can actually, contribute to the projects that we're doing. There's nothing in the school code that says that we can't do that. They just can't, get any funding from the school to travel anywhere. So what I've actually done for my drone program is I've actually worked with students at Washington State to help develop software for the projects that we're doing. And actually, my SLP project this year, I'm working in collaboration with students from Washington State on developing a application that will take information from the judge's mission planning system and then plot a path for our aircraft to travel autonomously that avoids all the obstacles. And so that is one example of things that you can do outside of Clark Aerospace where you're still, you're developing your skills and you're developing the ability to, build a portfolio that you can then show to future employers when you go out into the workforce. So there's a lot of real benefit from that. And actually, many of our students from our program who've contributed to projects over the years actually got jobs as a direct result of working for the Clark Aerospace Program. Our team lead for the rocket team a couple years ago, Andrew, he actually ended up being made the project manager for their high-powered hybrid rocket that was a 250-plus team at the University of Washington, simply because he was the team lead of the rocket team here. We have people who have directly gotten jobs as a result. Eric Albert, the first guy who was our team lead for the drone team, now works at In-Situ up the Gorge, which is a drone manufacturing company owned by Boeing. We have students who work for NASA as a direct result of this. We have students who now work for composite companies. Actually, one of my friends who's in the program and still works with us on the drone actually just got a job at Prototech Composites as a result of this. So people who work at Protopasta, the filament company, as a result of the aerospace program, and then there's countless others. And if you guys want to know more of those people and like where they work at, I can definitely get with you afterwards and share some of that with you. So in addition to gaining experience working in a team and working on some cool stuff where you can take things that you learn in class and then apply to a real world project, you also get the benefit of being able to show this off to employers and potentially get a job as a result. And it also gives you the ability to then make lifelong friends and just work with like-minded individuals who just want to do more with their college education than just do little one quarter projects. So some of our students, have been working on these projects for years, and they really enjoy it. It's passion projects for them. It's a passion project for me. If any of you are interested in working in a leadership position, that leadership is something that I've always wanted to do, and so this was a great opportunity for me to essentially, step up to the plate once our old team lead left to go work for NAVAIR, Naval Air Command in Maryland. I was actually able to step in and then essentially lead a team, and it gives me real world experience with that. So that's kind of what we are and what the benefit of the program is. And we actually have a room here on campus. When Keith retired, we actually procured a new room, which is the old physics lab down in APH. Unfortunately, COVID happened, so we didn't really get to do a ton of work in it. But when we come back to campus next year, we'll actually have that room open. And I actually plan on being there a couple times to consult with whoever decides to take over the drone team and, kind of help share some of the information I've learned with them so they can, either do their own project or continue the project we were working on. But in the interim, over the summer, our program actually plans on doing workshops for those who are interested in learning more about, basic aerodynamics, basic drone design, basic rocketry design and construction. We're also going to do workshops on 3D printing. We're going to do my team's going to do some test flights that people are more than welcome to come watch. So if you're interested in any of that, I am actually going to post a flyer here. So it's a link to a Google Drive document. Stand by here. Let me go ahead and get it quick. So there's a link to that. And so if any of you have questions or are interested in doing the program, I would strongly suggest you take a look at that flyer. It's something that a couple students and I put together. And it's actually got one of our advisors, Sophie Lynn, who is one of the physics teachers, one of the physics professors. She's actually one of our advisors. We actually have two advisors. The other one is Dave Reeves, who is one of the physics lab instructors. But if you're interested, you can either get a hold of Sophie or you can message me during class today, and I can talk with you more about this. But it's a really great program, and I really love to see it continue. COVID really hit us hard, but we managed to keep things going. We secured our budget for next year, And so we're going to continue to work on projects. We have all this hardware and all this expertise in the room, and it's a really great opportunity to work with hardware, work with soldering irons, work with 3D printers, work with composites, to build something really cool that one person could not do on their own in the amount of time that we have. So that's basically it. It's a lot of fun. Contact Sophie via that flyer. It has her email on there, or if you want, you can message me and I can give you my personal contact. Even if you just want to meet up with me next year at Washington State and go over some software projects. I plan on taking my SLP project next year and developing it further. So essentially extending our ground control software that we use, which is an open source software project. And I plan on integrating our interop client, which is the piece of software that talks to the judges server for our drone competitions. I plan on trying to integrate that into ground control, which is our ground control software. So doing that. Other things that I plan on doing with our team is object detection and identification, which is a machine learning problem that we actually do at our competition. Obstacle avoidance is another one, aircraft avoidance, landing logic. We have all sorts of things. So if you have any more questions about types of projects that we're doing from a software perspective, please feel free to ask me. Otherwise, I just love to get to know you guys next year. So yeah, feel free to hit me up. Does anybody have any questions? I do not have Discord, but we do have a Slack channel. So if you're interested, I could actually send you an invite to our Slack channel, and I check my Slack every day, and I can hit you up there if that works for you. So yeah, definitely, Logan. I can send you a direct message here in a little bit with an invite to that. Any other questions? Awesome, thanks. So the experience range, it can go all the way from knowing absolutely nothing, which is kind of where I was. I was just a hobbyist, just getting into building little wooden multicopters that I picked up on flight tests. I don't know if any of you have heard of flight tests on YouTube. That's actually how I got started. But my team started out knowing absolutely nothing about developing drones, other than some of us knew how to fly them. So it stretches all the way from that, knowing nothing or knowing nothing about rockets or anything else, all the way up to students who are just about to graduate with their bachelor's and are doing things like flow simulations, or like finite element analysis, or developing complex algorithms. And it kind of stretches the gamut. So next year, though, I will say that because COVID kind of hit us really hard, there's a lot of chance to get in at the ground level and start a brand new project. So for those of you who may feel a little intimidated hopping in on an existing project, we plan on doing workshops to kind of help build up that experience. But we also have the opportunity for students who have more experience to kind of help teach those who have less experience about what they've learned and help them with their projects to develop it. So that's kind of what I plan on doing, because I've really enjoyed the program ever since I started in it, and I don't want to see it go away just because COVID kind of put a damper on everything. So I plan on trying to put in a bunch of time. Yeah, it's everywhere in between, and so it's kind of a mentor-mentee type relationship between the more experienced students and the less experienced students. So as long as you have some desire to learn, we're the sort of people who try to help you out as much as possible. It's a great group who are all very helpful, and yeah, I can't say enough good things about it. Yes, you can. The one thing is that if the team does travel to a competition, because you won't no longer be a Clark student, you wouldn't be able to use Clark funds to travel. You would have to travel on your own if you wanted to go to all those competitions. But there's nothing that I could find that says that you can't contribute code or contribute some expertise. Like I said, I have two students who were former Clark students who just wanted to help out developing software, and so we've been working on a ground control application that supplements our ground control software. So yeah, there's nothing that says you can't do that. And then in addition to being a project that you put on your portfolio, you're helping do something freely. It's not just a one-off type thing. It's you're helping contribute to a team to do something bigger. And if you guys want more info, I can show you some of our test flight footage. I'm actually in the process of getting pictures from the competition I went to a couple years ago. I can share all sorts of stuff with you. We've got a trove of information on our Google Drive. So yeah, definitely hit me up, and I can tell you, especially for the machine learning stuff, because that was a part of our drone project that I never actually got a chance to implement because I didn't have enough people. was actually developing a camera system that could identify objects on the ground at the drone competition, and then report back what those were and what their location was. So that's actually something I would love to get somebody's help with in the future, so we can help supplement this project. So, anything else? All right, I'll turn it back over to you, Nick. Thanks everyone. I appreciate it. Yeah, feel free to hit me up if you have any more questions. I can get you added to our Slack channel. So to get involved, I would say probably the easiest way would be for me to send you an invite to our Slack workspaces. All depending on what team you kind of want to be a part on or what you want to do. We have a general workspace for Slack, and then for our specific drone and rocketry projects, I built separate Slack workspaces for those, so we can talk more technical stuff. And especially for all of you who are developing software applications, I've got a couple people at Washington State who have been contributing. They've been really busy lately, but yeah, definitely. And then if you're also interested in mechanical design or anything like that, I have a student at Washington State who actually just went there this last year, who's still working on our project. So yeah, definitely, I can send you, Tim and Logan, I can send you some links. So, and anybody else, if you want to hit me up, yeah, feel free, and I will send you a Slack invite. Cool. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks so much, Levi. Always exciting to hear about the program.
Definitely. And yeah, if you guys want, I can also post some pictures for our current aircraft design that we're doing too. It's a vertical takeoff and landing biplane. It's a tail sail,
Cool.
so it actually goes up and tilts and flies. It's pretty cool. But yeah, thanks, Nick. I appreciate you letting me talk.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your sharing all of that. And I've had students in the past who have taken advantage of this, and it really is a fantastic opportunity. I mean, the project-based learning is really the way to go, in my opinion. And this is just, there's so many parts and pieces to any of these competitions or projects, and hardware, software, technical writing, design, planning. I mean, all of this stuff comes into the mix. And, personally, I just think it's really fun working on large projects. It's even more fun working on large projects with other people who are enthusiastic and excited about it. And if this, appeals to you at all, definitely check into it, because there's just some amazing opportunities there. All right. So let's talk a little about PA4. I don't want to go through this in a lot of detail, but let me just show you some pieces of a solution to PA4. So I mentioned in the beginning of this assignment that this is a good exercise in sometimes taking a step back and bigger picture view and thinking, if I were starting this again, I would do this totally differently, right? Maybe you organized your classes one way, and partway through you realize, I really should have organized them this different way. Well, PA5 is an extension of PA4, so it's a really good opportunity to go back and do that reorganization. And sometimes, you can shorten your code, but you can clean up your code in the process. And that's got a few advantages. One, it can make it easier to work with. Two, it re-familiarizes your brain with what you did. And since you're going to start adding to your PA4 code to add the networked component, the cleaner your PA4 feels, the more comfortable it's going to be, and the more successful you'll be adding this new layer on top of it for adding a network connection. And if your code is kind of, you got it to work, but don't, look at it too long because it might break kind of thing, right? Consider, taking a little bit of time and going back and reworking it. Possibly starting from scratch, right? But using everything that you know in having written it once. If you're working in a group, you can continue working in a group. You can change groups. If you did PA4 alone, you can start or join a group for PA5, that's all totally reasonable stuff, right? This can be a big assignment, And, I was looking back at my solution to it, and I would write my code totally differently if I were to start over and rewrite it right now, because having talked about it and worked with students on it, I can see better ways that I could have organized what I wrote last year when I put together code for this. So that's a good exercise, and it will definitely help, um, brush up your skills and so on. You do not need to be in a group for PA5. Same deal as 4. You can work alone or groups of up to 3 people total. So your choice. And if you were in a group for PA4 and you want to do PA5 alone, that's fine with me. Just, make sure you talk it over with your team members and so on. Um, so, um, so here's one version of PA4, right? Start with the simplest class, which was box, and box doesn't do a whole lot. Um, a reset method that just sets everything to false and sets the owner to be blank. So I marked owner by a character, and that would be the first initial of whoever owns the box. Um, okay, cool. Um, and this is not complex code, but it's code that happens more than once, and so I just made a reset method to clear out the box. And then the top level is almost as simple, because most of this code is created um, by Window Builder for me. So, all the usual imports and so on. So, the main class is a JFrame. It's got a usual content pane, but it's also got a My panel, a main panel, which is the game playing area, and some text fields for the player's name. Didn't change the main method at all, so that's just the default. And then the constructor for this class, most of this is boilerplate stuff. There's a mouse listener around the J panel, so this is all stuff we talked about, and some labels: player 1 score, player 2. So this says whose turn it is. This is going to show the score. There's a start button, text fields for entering player 1 and player 2 name along with labels. Not a whole lot going on in there. The one thing I want to definitely point out here, though, is this line right here. So game is the My panel, right? What I called main panel. And these things like, the player's name is player 1. That's a J text field. Player 2 is a J text field. I want to be able to access those from the main panel, right? So the setup is something like this. So here's dots. And here's a main panel. And this is where the dots are happening. But outside this, you've got a text field for player 1's name, a text field for player 2's name, and, other information like that, a score, text field or label, and so on. But everything happens inside the main panel, right? When you click a mouse, it's a mouse click inside the main panel, which means you're going to draw lines, you're going to count boxes. You might need to update the score from the main panel. Or if someone completes a box, you need to drop that player's initial into that box. The initial is up here in the JFrame. So the main panel needs access to these objects that were created in the outside JFrame. And so one thing I did was, at the end of this whole constructor, I called the save method. And I passed in, a message object, a score object, and the 2 text fields that hold the players' names. And all this does, game is the main panel, all this does is save this information inside this game object, so that my J panel, my main panel, has access to these objects that were constructed outside of the game panel. So this is something you'll tend to do a lot of. right? If the main frame constructs the panel, then the main frame has access to everything inside here. Because I can just say, you know, name of the panel dot some method, right? But the panel itself doesn't inherently have access to things in the class that constructed this. So you can pass references to this, and you can do it in the constructor, or you can make a separate method like, you know, a save method that just pops those things into instance variables inside this object. And so this lets you get, you know, two-way access from one class to another. And you end up doing things like that a lot. So the J-frame, not a whole lot going on here, mostly done in Window Builder except for saving these objects inside the panel. And then the panel is really where most of the action happens. So this is a main panel, extends J panel, so you got box size and board size, so those are just variables. And this is that save method, right? So when I say save and I pass in, you know, two labels and two text fields, those get saved in these labels and text fields. So I have access to them inside this code. And then the constructor, and you know, most people did this, the constructor goes through and initializes your, you know, typically 64 element array of boxes, sets each element to a new box. So in here, board is the array of boxes, right? And then there's a reset method, right? So what does reset do? It basically gets you ready to play a new game. So you zero out the scores. You set the player to be player 1. You check to see if there's names entered in the player's text areas, and if not, you put a message saying, you know, enter a name for player 1 or player 2. And make sure they have different first initials so that, you know, you don't get confused and so on. So anytime I need to reset the game, or I need to start a new game, or I'm beginning the first game in the very beginning, I can just call reset and have all of this happen. And if there's something I forgot to do, if I needed to do something else to reset the game, right, I can just drop that in this method and, you know that I'm already calling reset every time I want to start the game. That will do this extra thing every place it needs to. So what else goes in here? Make the text fields where you put in the usernames uneditable if you don't want them to be able to change. Update the score. So update score draws the score, and it does that by figuring out what the score is by counting boxes, right, and seeing how many boxes are complete. Show the turn, so that figures out which player's turn it is and displays their name to say it's their turn. And then loop through your array of boxes and set all your booleans to false, right? And then set them to be unowned. Now I could have used the reset method inside box, right? Like I say, this is one of these things I would change going backwards. Set the running state to true to say, hey, people are allowed to click and draw lines. And then just call repaint, which will cause, you know, these modifications to appear on the screen. And so that's all the reset method, right? That basically reboots the game back to its initial state. Update score just displays the current score. So anytime I think the score might have changed, I'm just going to call update score. And it's going to, you know, pull out the first initial and say score, and then print out their scores and go on from there. And then show turn, same thing, just look at the player, and if the player is 1, use player 1's name, first initial, otherwise use player 2's names, first initial. Right? So these are just helper methods. These are not, you know, complex things to do. But by putting them inside methods, right, I avoid having to write this code again and again. Even if I'm only going to do this thing twice, right, it compartmentalizes it. And in some cases, even if you're only going to do something once, it's useful to set that code inside a method. So I don't have to look at this when I'm trying to debug something. I can just look at show turn and say, oh yeah, that's just showing whose turn it is. All right, the paint method draws the board, so this is probably similar to a lot of people's paint method. So first go through and make your array of dots. So that's pair of nested loops, and then go ahead and draw the lines. So again, same pair of nested loops. Figure out the x and y coordinates for upper left, lower right, and then pull out the box. So I just put that in a local box object, and then it's just 4 if statements. If the top flag is set, draw the top line. That's from x1, y1 to x2, y1. If the bottom is set, go from x1, y2 to x2, y2, and so on. And then if that box is owned by somebody, then the who field of that box will have an initial in it. Otherwise, it'll just be a blank. So I take that character, concatenate it with a string to turn it into a string, and just put that near the middle of the box. And so that's all I got to do anytime I want to draw the playing field. Just call the paint method. And how do I do that? Call repaint. So a lot of this is helper code, but the main panel is really two things: paint and some kind of click handler, right? So this is the paint. This is where it reads from memory and displays what needs to be displayed. And then this is where you respond to a mouse click and update your memory. So click on the board, update memory, paint gets called, read memory, display it on the game. And that's the whole, everything else is start up, end down, things like that. But basically, click the mouse, make some update to memory, and then paint, read from memory, and display. And if you can think of things in those terms, that's going to help with making this networked. Because basically half of our mouse clicks are going to come through a network connection from the other player, and our display, the memory is going to be exactly the same. The paint program doesn't care where these clicks came from. So it's really going to be making changes to this mouse listener. So what do you do when you click? So some debug messages. If you're not currently running, I just go ahead and I print a message and say, hey, you got to click start before you can go anywhere, and then I just return. This is our calculation for row and column. And if the row is illegal or the column is illegal, print a message saying it's outside the board and return. Don't do anything else. So that keeps you from getting, array access errors. Otherwise, go ahead and grab the box from the board array. And then this is a different version of that coordinate arithmetic that we keep going back to. But this basically calculates your straight line distance from the 4 edges. And then, it's just the set of if statements, right? So if left is the smallest, then the person clicked on the left. So see if left is already taken. If it is, say that spot's already taken and return. Otherwise, this is a new click. They've just taken the left edge of this box, so set the box's left edge to be true. And then, as long as they're not in the leftmost column, take the box to your left and set that box's right edge to be true. And you just replicate this 3 more times. So if the right is the smallest, then see if the right's already taken, and if it is, get out of here. Otherwise, set right to be true. And if they're not in the rightmost column, take the box on the right, set its left edge to be true. Same for the top, same for the bottom. Now it's important that I make this just an else instead of an else one more condition, because if I make each of these conditional, it's possible none of these will fire. Right? For example, if all of these distances were the same, right, none of these ifs would trigger. So you could do less than or equals and so on. But I just did a catch-all case down here, which said, otherwise we'll just assume it's the bottom and go from there. And then more helper methods, right? So check the board to see if it's filled. Well, how do I do that? I have a checkboard method. So that gives me a Boolean that says, is the game over or not? Okay, update the score. That'll calculate the new score and display it. If it's not filled, change the player's turn. Oh, see if a box was filled in. If a box did not get completed, change the player. So this is just a easy way to do an if statement, right? If player is 1, this will change it to 2. If player is 2, this will change it to 1. So change the turn if a box was not completed this turn. show whose turn it is. I don't care if it changed turns or not. I have a method called show turn, which will update the display to say it's so-and-so's turn. Now, I could do this inside, my check board where I say, oh, if a box was completed, then let's not update the turn, and so on. I don't want to do that. I just have a method. Anytime I want to see whose turn it is, I can just say show turn. Bingo, that information is going to appear. Did somebody win the game? I don't know. I'm just going to call this method winner. And if somebody won the game, that's going to take care of everything that needs to happen. And this is now separated from the code that's, responding to the mouse click, from the code that's checking to see if a box got completed, and so on. Any time that there's a mouse click, after I'm done updating memory, I'm going to see whose turn it is and display that. I'm going to see what the score is and display that. I'm going to see if the game is over and display that. Right? So we're breaking these things out into separate pieces so that we don't have to look at them all inside one big chunk of code. And then call repaint at the end, because probably some of this will end up changing memory, which would change, what the display looks like. Okay, how do we know if there's a winner? Well, if the scores add up to the number of boxes, the game's over. So I'll say game over. If the scores are the same, I'll say tie game. Otherwise, oh no, I just swallowed one of my fruit flies. Otherwise, display who wins, right, based on which score is greater. And then, since the game is over, make these name fields editable. And finally, checkboard, right? So go through each of the boxes in our board array, and if all 4 lines are filled and this box isn't owned by anybody, then set it to be owned by whoever's turn it is, and set a flag saying, hey, we've got a new box. Yeah, that's sad. Worse for the fruit fly than me, I think. And then based on whose turn it is, update one of the scores appropriately, and then return that flag at the end. So that's just an idea of compartmentalizing functions, breaking things up into pieces. So I don't know if that helps or not, but I've talked to some people, and I think people have their own ideas also about how to organize or reorganize their code and classes. So lots of options there. All right, let me start talking about PA5. We only have 5 minutes. But the afternoon class doesn't get the aerospace talk today, so they get theirs on Tuesday. We'll get through more of PA5 in the afternoon class, so you can watch the video for that if you want to get a head start on it. But let's take a quick look at PA5. So PA5 is the network version of DOTS. And let me just get you through the logistics of this. So we already talked about group projects, so you can work in groups, you can work alone, you can change your groups if you want. Same setup as before, make sure everyone's repo is consistent, names are in there, and so on and so forth. So this is basically PA4. All of your PA4 requirements and specifications remain the same, but we're going to do this as a client-server pair. So you're going to have 2 people, each running a copy of your program. One of them is going to have to designate themselves as the server, the other as the client. The server starts running first, and it basically waits for a connection from a client. So you want a pair of radio buttons on your game saying whether you're the server or the client. And for the server, you go ahead and say start, begin listening for a connection on port 1234. And then for the client, they can hit a connect button to port 1234 on whatever machine the server is running on, and that puts the 2 GUIs in contact with each other. And basically, you just send messages back and forth in response to mouse clicks. So the two games move in lockstep. They start off with a common notion of whose turn it is, and whoever's turn it is, when they click, you do your same update of the game as usual, but you also send the click information to the other side of the game, the client or the server, and their code receives that message and treats it as a mouse click. But it knows it's the other player's turn, so it will mark that line. If it completes a box, it will give that other player's initial in the box, and so on. So it's really just a wrapper around around what you already have. And so let's go ahead and run this. So there's one net dot, and let's run another. Now I'm doing this both on the same machine, but you know, it could be just two totally separate machines. So this machine I'll use as a server, and my name will be SSS, and this machine will be the client, and there'll be CCC. And so the server starts, and the start button changes into a quit, and now the client can connect. And so I'm connecting on localhost, that's my local machine. And so now these two games are connected to each other. So they both see the player one, it's their turn. So if I try to click over here, right, it's going to ignore that because it's not my turn. And, you know, it's giving me messages out here like not my turn. And so player one can click, and wherever they click, that line should appear on both windows, and now both players change to see player two, it's their turn. So player two clicks here, player one, and now if player two completes this box, they both see the box completed, they both see player two's initial, and it's still player two's turn. If player one tries to go, it's not their turn. So player two can go here, and player one, and player two, and player one, and player two, and now it's player one's turn, and they'll click right here, and that completes two boxes, right? And so their score has gone up, it's 2-1, it's still player one's turn, and all this information is synchronized across both screens. And it's easier than you might think. All you have to share is the click information. As long as these are the same program and they're well written, right? Player one making a click right here, well, if I just tell this system, hey, the player just clicked right here, which is what your PA4 can do, right? Then both of these should show a line at that location. And they should both switch to say it's player two, and if a box got completed, they should both update the score and so on. So even though these are perfectly in sync, we're not actually sharing all this information. All you have to share is the fact that, hey, I just made a mouse click right here. And so this game drew a line right there and switched to player one's turn, and this game drew a line right there and switched to player one's turn. All right, so there's more details in the write-up. You can look at those on Canvas. But that's the main addition, is just adding this ability to share mouse clicks. There's a little bit for the startup and shutdown, and there's some suggestions in here. We're going to start talking about threads next week. We have to talk about sockets from a client perspective, and then we'll start talking about threads. And you'll want to do your networking in a separate thread so that it plays well with Swing. But you can start designing this already. And like I say, you can also spend a bit of time going back, cleaning up PA4 if you feel like you want it to be structured differently. All right, so we'll get through more of this in the afternoon class. Watch that video if you want more details, but we'll talk about this more on Monday. Have a good weekend. I will see you next time.